How long have you been up there?
Middle of May.
Oh, okay. So they always
Good
take
evening.
Still doing.
ramp up time here.
Good evening. I'm Gene Grisini, Vice Chairman of the Burnsville Economic Development Commission, and we are starting our meeting with the adoption of the agenda. I'll need a motion for that.
So moved.
Okay. Rick and Kevin. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Then I need a motion for the approval of the minutes from November 14th, 2012, last year.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving forward, we have an open business forum for anyone that wants to speak to the commission. I don't see anyone in the audience today, so we'll move forward from that. We will review our draft, our 2013 draft of the work plan, and Skip is going to present that to us. Go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'd like to do, if I can get the computer to cooperate, is review your work plan from 2012 and go over what you accomplished, and you had quite a few accomplishments last year. And then I would like to present staff's recommendation for your work plan. And as you noted in your background, there's a couple of items that staff is going to ask you to have some discussion on. And then if there's any items that any of the commissioners would like to see added to the proposed work plan, we can discuss those also. As I said, last year you had a very successful year. We started off the year, we reviewed the My Burnsville Playbook, which, if you remember, that came from the 360s communities. They had gone through a process over a couple of years, a process they called a convening. They had to form some subcommittees, and one of their subcommittees was focused on economic development, and they had put together kind of a playbook that they were going to go forward with. Unfortunately, as you all probably remember, 360s communities had a little bit of a staff turnover last year, and that effort pretty much disappeared during all that staff turnover. So nothing's really happened, and to my knowledge, I don't know that anything is going to happen with that effort. We also went through the MRQ plan, and we'll note later on in the presentation that there were some things that came out of there that we've got put in motion after we had kind of talked with this group on what we might want to do. You did have a presentation by the director of the Workforce Investment Board, the workforce centers, and the whole idea behind that was to get you acclimated to the types of services that are available through the Workforce Center and also through the state's business services people. We spent a couple of meetings early in the year last year discussing various types of incentives that we could have for development in Burnsville. And we actually, with your assistance, drafted what we referred to as a loan guarantee policy, which you actually recommended that we adopt. When that got to council level, council gave it a lot of thought, and while they did appreciate the efforts that this committee put forth, they elected to not adopt the policy, and there at that time was some discussion that the SBA loans were loosening up a little bit and some of the bank loans were loosening up a little bit. So the policy has not been adopted, and at this point in time, I don't know that it actually will come back to be adopted. We reviewed the duration time on reader boards. As you may know, in 2011, when we went through about a 6-month process redoing our sign ordinance with the commission's help, we did a 1-year trial on a 30-second duration. We reviewed that. You recommended that we stay at 30 seconds, and that is, in fact, what council adopted, and that is now our ordinance. We did have a couple commissioners that assisted us in the putting together of the business survey that we did in April and May of last year. And as you may recall, we actually, that survey, we came out with some very high marks, as we normally do, and our businesses, thank goodness, are fairly happy with what goes on in Burnsville. At your last meeting of last year, you reviewed the development portions of the legislative agenda. You recommended adoption and presentation of those, which is exactly what council did. and they have made a presentation to our elected officials so that they're aware of what our legislative agenda is. And as we discussed, that now allows staff to weigh in throughout the session this year whenever anything comes up that's on our agenda. We did, once again, last year, hold the Burnsville Commercial Real Estate Council event, or as we refer to it, the BECREC event. We hosted about 25 of our Twin Cities commercial brokers for a night out at Canterbury. It's the second year in a row we've actually done the event at Canterbury. It's a nice place for the event. It does allow us, since we're all right there, while the horses are racing and everything else, it allows us to, in between races, to talk with the brokers and get to know them better. And it's a relatively inexpensive event, which is why the BECREC group, our building owners, appreciate it, because it's pretty much their money that's funding this for us. Last year when we did your work plan, one of the things that you requested was that we do STEM updates at your meeting, and we have provided you with our activity reports each time and have highlighted a couple of the more major things that have gone on in the previous couple of months, and we will be proposing to do that again also. Another thing that was put on the work plan last year was the attendance at different economic development events. We've had some attendance at that, and as you noted in your background, when we get into a presentation on this year's work plan, that is one item that we will ask the Commission to discuss and give us some feedback on. You recommended that we sell the EDA land that exists at Cliff and River Ridge, which is across the street from the new Walmart. That contract was drafted and was actually never signed by the proposed purchaser. The initial development they thought they could put on the land did not happen. And they asked if they could just, for all intents and purposes, let everything ride until they got a development. They have not gotten that yet, and quite frankly, we'll probably go to them in the next few weeks and say, let's forget about it, and let's go back and just put the land on the market and try and sell it. You recommended that we fund the MCCD Open to Business program, which is exactly what Council did. I'm happy to say that we're kicking that program off right now. Just to refresh you, the Open to Business program, the MCCD group has hired an individual that will be specifically assigned to Dakota County, and the Dakota County CDA and all of the cities in Dakota County are participating in the program. This individual will provide business counseling at no charge to any resident in the county or business owner in the county that is looking to start a business, expand a business, or needs any type of that type of assistance. They also have the ability to make loans. They will make a loan of up to $25,000 for a startup. They can do a little bit higher level loan for an existing business, and they can also do gap financing if a business's bank is going to be doing a loan for a business. Once a month, on the third Wednesday of every month, from 1 to 3, the individual, whose name happens to be Laurie Crow, will actually be here in Burnsville City Hall, and it will be kind of a walk-in, kind of no appointment. Any business wants to come in and talk to her, they can. The idea is that those appointments and those times would maybe be a 10-15 minute kind of a thing, and if it needs to go longer than that, she would then make an appointment with them to go to their business and get more involved in it. And she will obviously rotate through the cities in Dakota County each month doing that. If a business contacts her and wishes an appointment at their place of business, she will do that also. Laurie's strength is on the marketing side of things. The other two primary individuals in the MCCD group, one is very strong in what I would call business plans and business counseling, and the other individual is very strong in the financial aspects of a business. So between the three of them, they can pretty much help any of our businesses. You will all be invited to what we're calling a launch breakfast on February 28th. It's kind of going to be the major launch of this event in Dakota County. And all the cities were all kind of working between now and then to get all of our marketing materials together and everything else. So that program, you recommended it, and it is well off to a start, and we're looking for hopefully some really big things out of that. You also recommended the council adopt the Fourth Amendment to a contract we have with Burnsville Crossing LLC. That is actually the owner of the land where the new CVS pharmacy is located. That amendment actually allowed them some additional time in which to complete the development on the undeveloped portion of that property. And that is supposed to be a 5,000 square foot office and/or retail, or combination office retail building. And with the building of the pharmacy and everything else, obviously they couldn't be working on that land at the same time. And they don't have a tenant, and as you all well know, without a prime tenant, you're not going to build a spec building. So that amendment will give them a couple of extra years to work on that. And then lastly, you recommended the council adopt the TIF 7 district plan, which they did do last month, and that will basically allow us to capture the increment off of some properties down in the MRQ, primarily the properties located in the Lady Bird and DuPont circle that exists down there. And the increment that we capture off the future development, we will use for infrastructure improvements, and we'll use some of it for some of the soil remediation that we're going to do. So that has happened also. So you had a very, very successful year. If any of the commissioners have any questions or comments regarding last year's work plan, we certainly would take them at this point.
As a new council or member, I think it would be helpful to maybe see where the purpose of the EDC is obviously to generate new business for business development in Burnsville, and so some of the effort that the EDC does and the city does, where do you see the biggest payback based on efforts that the city does? So, as an example, should we be focusing on all development equally? Should we be trying to get big development in? Because you're looking for development to generate the vitality of the city, but also to generate revenue, property taxes and things like that.
Commissioner, I would say that, in all honesty, the efforts that probably bring us the most is actually the efforts through the BECREC group.
Okay.
We have been told, just as a review, besides the one event that we do every year, kind of as a thank you for bringing potential businesses out to Burnsville, we do send a quarterly newsletter out to a listing. We have about 100 Twin Cities commercial brokers that we have on our email list. We send a quarterly newsletter out to them in which we highlight different happenings that are going on in Burnsville. We typically list whatever new businesses have come within the last 3 months. When we do, the last one had some information about the Open to Business program and everything else. And really, we do it as a way of just giving them ammunition when they're showing properties out here that they know some things that are going on. Brokers are coming from all over the Twin Cities. They're not focused on Burnsville all the time. We also, each holiday throughout the year, under that BECREC banner, we do send a greeting out to those same brokers. We have had a number of brokers tell us that we are one of the only cities that is in ongoing contact with them, and that they do utilize some of that information that they pick up in the newsletters when they're showing property, and it just puts them in a frame of mind where they feel a little more comfortable. The other almost side benefit that we didn't really realize is a number of the brokers have become very comfortable at calling city staff and saying, I have a unique tenant, and I have a couple of different properties in Burnsville that I'm thinking of showing this tenant, but before I do that, I'd like to check and make sure that there's no zoning problems. Mm-hmm. And very often we've been able to say, well, don't show property A because it's not zoned properly for that tenant, but B and C are, and by the way, did you happen to think about property D over here? The nice thing about that is the brokers are obviously on commission, and the worst thing they want to do is have a tenant fall in love with a property only to then find out the use is not allowed in that general area. So we found some ancillary benefits like that where the broker community, I think, is comfortable that they can call city staff and get information and get some advanced ammunition when they're showing property. Now, does that mean that they'll, push somebody into a Burnsville property instead of another property? Absolutely not. I mean, these guys are on commission, and they're going to put the person wherever they can put them and make their commission. But I think we've developed by this a good working relationship, and I do know that if a prospective tenant is looking to be south of the river, they will always check if there's a workable solution in Burnsville. And that's really, I mean, if we can just go up to bat every time, we'll win more than our fair share. So I would say that those efforts are some of our best efforts. For us to get major development, typically that's going to occur if somebody's willing to buy an existing building, tear it down, such as the CVS pharmacy,
Right.
and do it. We're not seeing a lot of that. We did last month hit what for us would be a grand slam, and that is there's a company called ShopJimmy.com who leased out 289,000 square feet of space in the I-35 distribution center, which is down on 13. For those of you who've been here a long time, it's the old our own warehouse, hardware warehouse, which actually is like 435,000 square feet in total. I mean, for us to have a company lease that much space and bring 120 employees here, that's a grand slam for us. And again, the brokers involved in that throughout that deal were checking in with us on different pieces of information that they needed, and the owner was quoted in Finance and Commerce as saying, well, this was the perfect location, the perfect where, he was saying all those things that if you're in my job, you just love to see people say in print about your city. So it's those types of things that are coming out. Mr. Chair.
Why did they select that one? Do you know?
For the most part, location. Probably the location plus he was looking for a large amount of space, and primarily warehouse space. And there's not that much warehouse space in the Twin Cities. He consolidated from 3 different cities. So you put that together with a building like that that's literally a minute and a half from a major highway, and he sells everything online and then, ships it, air or FedEx or whatever. It all goes together.
We've done some work for their company, and that's been his vision the whole time, is to find a big warehouse at some point. And we don't work with him anymore, but we helped him in the startup phase. And that was the perfect building at the perfect time.
Space was the key. Space was the key then. Location and space.
Location. And the interesting thing was the initial lease was for 239,000 square feet. And as they started the build out, they decided to take another 50,000. So, I mean, he literally expanded before he even got into the building. So to answer your question, Commissioner, the BECREC events and the BECREC work is probably the thing that pays out the most to us. And almost everything else is, kind of falls ancillary from there. It's kind of, everyone says that they're a business-friendly city. We really are, and it goes beyond just our community development staff. It goes throughout our staff. It comes out on all of our surveys, and again, those things play out for people. Some of our best, leads literally come from other businesses that have moved here and tell their friends. That's good space, good location, good city. Other questions, comments that we should? What I'd like to do now, Commissioners, is go through staff's recommendation for your work plan next year, and then we will certainly entertain, it's your work plan, we'll entertain whatever additional suggestions that you have. With all the emphasis that's going to be on the MRQ, not only this year but in upcoming years, we thought it'd be a good idea at some point this year that we'll come before you and kind of give you an update on where we are with the soil remediation, where we are with the interim use permits, what's going on, what's happening, just so you know what's going on. Same thing with the Open to Business program. As much as that's going to be a focal point for us this year and next year, we believe we should probably at some point this year come before you and again give you an idea where that is and where that's going, get feedback and help from you. As most of you are aware, we are in the process of attempting to sell the former AAA land, the little bit of land that we have left from the AAA purchase of back in the early 2000s. We suspect that either at a special meeting next month, or if not, hopefully at your March meeting, that we can actually bring you a recommendation for that sale. There is a purchase agreement, a draft purchase agreement that is in the hands of the proposed buyer, who is having their attorney review it. And as soon as their attorney accomplishes that and brings it back, we'll bring it to you for your recommendation. Our communications department has had a discussion with council at a work session a couple of months ago regarding the possibility of allowing advertising on the city's website. Our communications staff would actually like to bring that proposal, once they have it crafted, to you for your feedback. Good idea, bad idea, if it's a good idea, what should some of the parameters be, that sort of thing. I'm sure you're all aware that in late December, council instituted a moratorium on thrift stores in Burnsville, so that we can update our ordinance as it relates to thrift stores, or I should say create an ordinance as it relates to thrift stores. Once staff has that done, which we expect that will occur sometime in the early part of this year, we would bring that to you for your review and comment and suggestions. We are also in the process of crafting an ordinance as it relates to vending trucks, especially whether or not we would allow vending trucks to operate in our city parks. Again, in the early part of this year, we will have that draft crafted, and we would bring it to you for your review and recommendation prior to taking it to council. As in every year, towards the end of this year, we'd bring the development portions of the legislative agenda to you for comment and recommendation like we did last year. We're suggesting that we continue the BEC Rec efforts, and we continue that one annual event. The BEC Rec is a subcommittee of the Economic Development Commission, and as such, we need at least 2 commissioners to be assigned to that subcommittee. Typically, that subcommittee meets once or twice in a planning format to plan the event. So it's not a tremendous amount of additional time and effort. Last year, Commissioner Andreski and Commissioner Reavers were on that subcommittee, but that will be something that you'll need to do this year if we're going to continue with that event as assigned 2 people. Staff would also recommend that we continue to update you on the STEM activities as we have in the past. We do have on your draft the commissioner involvement piece that you put on your work plan last year. Last year, on your work plan, you suggested that each commissioner attend at least 4 economic development type events. We had 16 ribbon cuttings and open houses, and we had commissioner attendance at 4 of them. We had the BEC Rec event at Canterbury, as we've discussed, and we had a commissioner attend that. There were some other types of events, committee training, joint work sessions with council, things like that, and of those 7 other events, we had commissioner attendance at 5 of those. The average for the commission was attendance at 2.5 economic development related events last year. And it ranged from, we did have one commissioner who actually went above and beyond and attended 6 events, and 3 of you attended 1 event. We understand, especially with the ribbon cuttings and the open houses, many of them occurred during the day, and many of you, while you live in Burnsville, work outside of Burnsville, and we understand that that's obviously hard to get here for those, which has made staff think that's something that we should discuss. Is that something you want to retain, in your work plan, or do you want to delete it and just not focus on it, or maybe you want to modify it? And we would ask at this point, maybe from discussion amongst commissioners, as to whether or not that's a viable piece to have on your work plan for this year.
Commissioners, your thoughts?
I attended one open house, but I was there before you got there, so You gotta make sure you got me down for that one at the coin, the gold and silver.
I have my spies, Commissioner.
I was there. I was there before the cake came out.
Skip, what was the event at the Performing Arts Center? Was that one of these? There was some event, I think maybe the chamber was involved as
That
well.
was a chamber.
That was the Twin Cities. It's the Initiative Minnesota,
Oh, the Greater
Minnesota.
Minneapolis
Yeah.
or what?
So
Was that considered one of these?
Probably was.
Oh,
I'd have to go
Okay,
back to the...
just curious, yeah, okay. I like the idea of having commissioners going to these, and while I don't know that I can make 4 a year, maybe the number is a little too high for some of us, but I think as a group, it's a good way to show our support and involvement in these events.
I would agree with everything he said, yeah. No, I think it's a good idea.
Do you get a motion, Kevin, or?
Well, I would certainly like to have us continue, but is it, what do you guys think? Is it a matter of just the number? Skip, you indicated we had 4, an average of 4 events per commissioner, that was there?
Your goal last year was 4, and the average was actually 2.5.
Should we drop the goal to a number closer to what we actually hit?
not after 1 year. I would suspect we just make a motion to keep it
Keep it
as is, as a kind of a metric, and then, because the ribbon cutting events are kind of fun. And if they're Thursday night, they're usually right before the after hours, and that's the couple that I went to. So, because I knew there was a treat at the end, right, Gene? but I would keep it. I would make a motion to keep it as is.
I would second that.
And
Further discussion, gentlemen, commissioners? Hearing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Yep, we'd ask you to keep that in.
We will keep it in. The other one well, I should say there's actually two that we'd ask for some discussion on. The other is the Open Business Forum. This was added to the work plan last year. The idea was that we would have an opportunity for business to address the commission on items that are not on your agenda, very similar to citizens' comments at the council. We actually had no business come all of last year, nor was there anyone here tonight either, obviously. So the question becomes, is there a reason to continue that on your work plan? Obviously, it's an item on the agenda. If you wish to just keep it there in case a business wants to, you certainly can. If no one's here, just like tonight, we'll just move on with the agenda. But again, that was something we thought was worth discussing.
Is there any other group that has that open period before or after their meetings?
None of our other commissions do. The council has citizens' comments at every one of their meetings.
I guess I'd like to see it stay there, even though we didn't have any attendance. I guess the question I would ask is how can we improve the advertising of it, or marketing of it, which, Chris?
if I may, one of the more productive sessions that we've had since I've been on the commission is when we had the massage dialogue, with the massage parlors, and then also obviously the sign ordinance, and there was a lot of dialogue back and forth. I think if you make it more industry specific on a topic, you get more engagement. And so maybe what we do is we try to pick out a couple of specifics and highlight them with the caveat anybody can come, but then you get people's attention a little more because it's industry specific, and if it's something the council's going to address anyway, it kind of gives a nice start to the dialogue in that regards. But
I would totally agree with you, Commissioner. The theory behind the Open Business Forum was something that was not actually specifically on your agenda. I would agree with you. When we're looking, I would presume when you review the thrift ordinance or the vending truck ordinance, we will have some people here.
Yep.
That's very, very normal. I think what you're experiencing, and there is absolutely no reason why you can't leave it on your agenda, I think what you're experiencing is most of our business people are very busy running their business. And quite frankly, if they have an idea, they're probably not going to take the time to come here and express it to you. They're either, if they happen to engage one of you somewhere, express it to you and hope you carry it back to the commission, which is exactly what we hope happens also, or quite frankly, they're gonna contact our chamber and say, would you work this through the process with the city? Again, if you wish to keep it on your agenda, there is absolutely no reason why you can't keep it on your agenda, and the offer is obviously always there for a business that has some reason they want to come. You know, they may come and say, hey, maybe you guys should be looking at something like this.
Commissioner?
Is there a way that we should try to solicit businesses, or does it make sense to even solicit businesses for that purpose? To let them, do the businesses know that that's an open forum for them?
Initially last year, Commissioner Reavers, when this was put on, you asked to put this on your work plan, we did some advertisement of it. We asked our chamber to do some advertisement, and promote it. As most of you know, we've had a changeover in chamber presidents, and quite frankly, the new chamber president has been deeply engrossed in becoming a new chamber president and learning his way around. So I doubt very seriously if this is at the top of his list. My suggestion would be that as commissioners, you consider doing two things. One, obviously, if you encounter a business that has questions or comments or thinks something should be different or anything like that, you could certainly either A, encourage them to come to one of your meetings and during this time express that to the commission, and then if the commission thinks it's something that should be followed up on, that's certainly direction you can give staff. Or, as commissioners, certainly part of your role, if the business doesn't want to take that time, is to bring it to a meeting and say, during this period of time, I'd like to have a discussion about a conversation I had with a certain business that has an issue with an ordinance or something. And I'd like some feedback from staff, and then, we'll take it appropriately from there. Either one of those would obviously be of benefit. The more open communication that it can exist between city staff and our businesses, the better it is for all of us. So if the commission wants to leave it on the agenda, absolutely, we can do that.
I would move we leave it on the agenda.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
The last thing that staff would like some input on is, as all of you know, there is a regional economic development effort called Greater MSP. You reviewed it when it came into existence a couple of years ago. Burnsville is a yearly contributor to that effort. We contribute $25,000 a year to that effort. There was some thought at the staff level, when we make that contribution in this year, that will be our third year that we've made that contribution. And it will be the third year that Greater MSP has been in existence. So they're up and running and functioning and doing things and everything else. The thought at the staff level was possibly at some time this year you'd like an update as to the return on investment that Burnsville is getting for that, what will now be a $75,000 investment. We can tell you the amount of potential leads that they have generated and how many times they've shown properties and all of those types of things. We can also certainly cover for you the marketing they do. They do a tremendous amount of marketing outside of the Twin Cities area. And if that's something that you think would be of value, we would add that to your work plan and at some point this year make an update on what's going on with Greater MSP.
I'm hearing all heads nod.
Is it anticipated that would be a continuing $25,000 investment next year? Continuing the same amount, or is it?
Commissioner, Greater MSP would like to always see the $25,000. That is something that every year when we start our budget plan, which we typically start in June, that is something that council discusses on a yearly basis. Last year, after staff's initial presentation of the budget, council did ask if staff could find a way to cut the budget a little bit more. Staff put together a number of suggestions. I believe there were 10 suggestions. One of those suggestions was actually to lower the investment in Greater MSP from $25,000 to $10,000. That was one item that council elected to not accept from staff, and they said, no, we want to leave it at $25,000. So, yes, Commissioner, it does get discussed. It's not an automatic, we're going to do it every year. It's actually a focal discussion point every year, because obviously the spending of $25,000 is significant to the city.
Commissioner?
Just a quick question. Is that more of a contribution, charitable contribution amount that's determined by the donor then? It sounds like based on what you...
I'm
or is-
sorry, Commissioners, Greater MSP actually establishes a level of suggested contribution based on population of a city. For example, Bloomington is, I believe their suggested contribution is $100,000. The county's suggested contribution is I believe it's either $100,000 or $125,000, I forget. There are some cities in our county whose contribution obviously is less than ours. There actually, of the 10 cities in Dakota County, 5 are contributing cities. Dakota County actually has a greater percentage of their cities contributing to Greater MSP than any of the other 13 counties. And there are actually a couple of counties in which the county makes a contribution to Greater MSP, but none of the cities do. There are actually 2 counties that they get absolutely no contribution from.
So it's voluntary, though.
They're still...
They give a suggested amount, and then it's a voluntary
Yes.
effort. And then is there a differentiating bias by Greater MSP as to who's giving, in terms of their focus and that kind of thing?
No.
Okay.
Their driving focus is the promotion of the greater metropolitan area. And if they have a business from outside the area that wants to move here, they need to find whatever is the workable space. And if that workable space is in a city or a county that is not a contributing member, they're still going to show that space and promote that space. And I think that's one of those things that if you look at the overriding philosophy of making this a better region, that has to be an acceptable fact. And then each county and city needs to make a decision whether they're willing to financially help that, even if essentially they're treated equally as someone who does not help it.
Skip, my recollection is the greater metro also included a couple of counties in Wisconsin.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. There are 11
contributing?
counties in the metropolitan area and 2 counties in Wisconsin.
Do you know if they're contributing?
I don't know my geography. Whatever are the 2 closest counties.
Hudson,
Yeah. From what I understand, in other regions of the United States, that's not abnormal to have overlapping if it's an economic area of a geographically, to have it overlap another state. So what they're doing is not exactly abnormal. I don't know how happy I'd be if I was in one of the counties in Wisconsin and it was Greater MSP, but it is what it is. We will add that to your work plan, and certainly at some point this year give you, probably prior to us engaging in budget discussions with council, we'll give you an update of what's been happening over the last couple of years and get some input from you as to how we should proceed. At this point, those are the suggestions for your work plan this year from staff. It now would be, I guess, if there's any additional items that we've overlooked that any of the commissioners believe should be included.
Yeah, just a comment. Would it be possible to, when you send out that email to the BCREC, to shoot us a copy of what that email, since you thought that was the most effective EDC effort, that email that goes out to them, I don't know how often it is, if it's quarterly or just, do we get a copy of that? Do we get a copy of that?
If
That
you
email?
do not, Commissioner, I apologize. You should be on my email blast because it goes.
Oh, I get the
Oh,
blast, yeah.
okay.
That's why it's in there someplace?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, whenever we send out the newsletter and whenever we send out a greeting, we include all of you.
Excuse me. That's right.
And were they involved in the survey as well, that group? Or is that just business owners here in Burnsville?
The Burnsville Commercial Real Estate Council, Commissioner, is a grouping of building owners, multiple building owners who own multiple buildings in Burnsville. Not all of them are physically located in Burnsville. For example, a broker by the name of Gary Lally, who's basically been the de facto chair probably for the last 12 years now, he works for Hoyt Development, which is not located in Burnsville, but they do own a number of buildings.
Okay.
So it's more based on if you own multiple buildings. Quite frankly, if you owned one building and you wanted to participate and help, so be it.
Yeah, but I was thinking about that survey that you mentioned that was done in either April or May, the business survey. Do they participate in the business survey of the?
I can't tell you, Commissioner, because it's a blind survey.
Okay.
We hire a firm by the name of Decision Resources, and when they did the survey, they surveyed 300 of our businesses. We obviously are not told who those businesses are. I don't even know. I don't even think the callers really know who those businesses are. And then they compiled all the results of that survey, which is we presented it here prior to actually you being on the commission, and then it's presented to council. And we used to do it every 2 years. We'll probably now do it every 4 years.
Okay.
Again, a budgetary type discussion. Presumably, some of our building owners who are also have their business in Burnsville may have gotten surveyed, but I can't
Okay.
tell you if they did or didn't.
Okay.
The other part that we need to discuss tonight, Commissioners, is the Burnsville STEM Alliance work plan is actually part of your efforts. So what I'd like to do, I included it in your background, is briefly tell you what staff's thought is about the work plan for the STEM Alliance and those efforts this year, and then if we staff's recommendation would be that you adopt that work plan, since it is basically your effort. Our target is that we would like to attract 10 additional companies this year that have a science, healthcare, technology, engineering, or math background to them. As you may have, I think we noted in your background, last year we attracted 7. We would like to attempt to have 5 of our existing companies that have a STEM basis to them go through an expansion. We had 4 last year that expanded. We would propose to continue all the marketing efforts that we have done in the past, and as you saw from your background, we exhibit at trade shows. We have a newsletter that goes out to our STEM-based businesses, and that newsletter also goes out to a number of ancillary types of organizations around the Twin Cities that provide assistance to STEM-based businesses. The city belongs to a number of associations: the Minnesota High Tech Association, the Economic Development Association of Minnesota, Life Science Alley, and the MedNet Group, all of which have a basis to promote STEM-type activities. So our work plan basically says we'll continue doing all of those types of marketing efforts. We also put in that work plan that we'd like to continue the BECREC efforts we do. The Workforce Investment Board, our Community Development Director, Ms. Jenny Faulkner, she serves on the Workforce Investment Board's Executive Council, and she's been a member of the Workforce Investment Board for, I believe, almost 6 years now. I serve on one of their committees, which is the Business Services Committee. In our STEM Alliance work plan, we would propose that we continue to do those types of efforts and be engaged in what the Workforce Investment Board does.
Are you aware that I'm on the board?
Yes. Yes, I think you were like the original founder. We also do a lot of joint efforts with the school district and a number of our surrounding post-secondary institutions. Most of them have coursework that is related to the STEM. We would propose that we continue to do those efforts with those educational institutions. We every year attempt to pursue grants for various redevelopment projects. The Dakota County CDA offers a grant opportunity every year. Maximum grant a city can get is $250,000. Burnsville has actually gotten a $250,000 grant every year that the CDA has had that in play. I believe we're on about the 6th or 7th year now. And we actually will be putting in for a grant. We'll actually be submitting paperwork next week for that. We would propose we continue those efforts. We also assist other businesses and institutions, especially those that are engaged in a STEM type activity, in grants that they pursue. One of our businesses, Quality Ingredients, with the assistance of Dakota County Technical College, received a $115,000 training grant last year for the training of their employees that were going to be engaged in the operation of the new tower that they built last year. They asked for a letter of recommendation from the city, which we obviously graciously applied. We've done some things in the past with Inver Hills Community College and Fairview Hospital for some training purposes there. So basically, anytime there is a business and/or an educational institution that is trying to get a training grant to help one of our businesses, we certainly do anything we can to assist them in that pursuit, which we would say we should continue to do. On the STEM Alliance, we also have put in that we'll promote the Open to Business program. That's, I think, pretty obvious. And then we do engage in a variety of retention efforts over the course of the year, which you can see in the work plan that was supplied to you, from visiting companies to being at chamber-type events to talk to companies. We have a very unique program in that we generate way-to-go letters to any of our businesses that are cited for any type of accomplishment. Many of those letters come off of, for those of you who get the Minnesota Business Journal, they have their top 25. Anytime one of our businesses cracks the top 25, a letter goes out to them signed by the mayor and the city manager. And there's a number, as they've been spelled out on the proposed work plan in your background, a number of those types of things that we would suggest that we continue to do. Having gone through that, I should step back. If there's any questions or comments regarding the proposed STEM work plan for this year, I would certainly take those at this time.
Comments, questions? Hearing none, go ahead.
We would ask three things from the commission tonight. First of all, the your draft work plan that we went through with the additions that are, I should say, the things you elected to keep plus the addition of the greater MSP, we would ask for a motion to recommend that council adopt that work plan, and our chair or vice chair would then present that work plan to council either at the end of this month or the beginning of next month. And that would be the first thing I would need, Mr. Vice Chair, is that motion.
Okay, gentlemen.
I'll make a motion.
Chris, motion, second?
Second?
Rich, second. Any further discussion, gentlemen? Commissioners? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, passed. Yep.
The second item, Mr. Vice Chair, that we would request of the commission tonight is that the STEM Alliance work plan that was presented to you, because that is an effort of this commission, we would ask that you have a motion to adopt that work plan.
So moved.
Second?
Chris? Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
And the final item, Mr. Chair, that we would ask for is we need two commissioners to be part of the BECREC we need at least two commissioners to be part of the BECREC subcommittee. You can have more if you wish, but your bylaws do call for at least two. And we would need two of the commissioners to basically step forward to be part of that planning committee.
Commissioners, are there any volunteers? I would volunteer.
I can do it again. I mean, because last year I came on at the end and just went to the Canterbury event. So.
Anyone else?
I'll take it. I'll go through that one.
So you've got three this year.
And we would, Mr. Vice Chair, we would need a motion nominating the three of you.
Motion to nominate Chris Andriski and Roger Kleppe and myself, Gene Grazzini, as members of the BREC committee.
Mr. Vice Chair, you can't make that motion. You're leading the meeting.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to nominate Commissioner Grazzini, Commissioner Andriski, and Commissioner, Kleppe as BEC-REC committee members.
A second.
I'll second that.
Discussion. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay. Are there any updates, Skip?
We provided you in your background the activity report for the last 2 months of last year for the STEM efforts. I would just draw your attention to a couple of items. We did last year, as we have for a number of previous years, we did attend the Life Science Alley Annual Conference. We had a booth there in which we exhibited. As is typical at that conference, we made a number of contacts, and a number of former contacts were renewed. That conference draws about 12 to 1,500 attendees for a one-day event. What is nice about that conference is that most of those attendees are actually the decision makers in bioscience companies, so they are very good contacts to make. That's always been a good conference to be at. The traffic last year at the exhibit booth and in the exhibit hall itself was actually not very good. So this year, staff is considering going to that conference, but we may not actually exhibit at that conference, and we believe we can make the same contacts by being at the conference. And then I would again just draw your attention to the fact that all of the efforts for the Open to Business program have started. We are working on them. We are beginning to create some additional promotional items that will go hand in hand with the promotional items that the Open to Business folks are doing. So we are going to work very hard to get that program up and running. And I certainly, Mr. Vice Chair, would answer any questions the Commission may have regarding the efforts on the STEM Alliance.
Hearing none.
I had one question on, you had 4 that were new. How many that you said that were expanded the STEM-based companies in 2012?
We had 4 STEM-based current businesses who expanded.
Okay.
And we had 7 additional STEM-based business that came to Burnsville last year, Commissioner, and that was out of a total of 47 new businesses that came to Burnsville last year.
Thank you.
Skip, if I may, I also, Beckhoff Automation, which is located on Nicollet as you head towards Cliff. I did some work for them, over 10 years ago. They're a German manufacturer that distributes here in the United States, and coming from Germany, that I did some work and went overseas and whatnot, and they're moving to Savage.
Yes, that's correct.
As you know,
Yes.
and that's a pretty big loss for Burnsville. We could have kept that here. It's an industrial company. They similar to Shop Jimmy, do most of their work via wholesale, but I don't know, maybe we need to pay a little more attention to what's already in our wheelhouse, because losing an existing business is almost worse than finding
I would totally agree
current
with you,
business and-
Commissioner. It was our understanding that they wished to build,
right, and by the time I found out, I made a few phone calls.
and we did
and it
not
was
have
too
any place
late.
for them to build.
Okay, so they checked Burnsville too. 'Cause that was made before I was a commissioner. and-
My understanding is, based on what they did in Savage, they could not have done that in
Right.
Burnsville.
So there wasn't- okay.
Obviously, we would have loved to have kept them.
Okay.
We thought about tearing down the building that you're building. I'm just kidding. But yes, you're absolutely right.
Remember, we're a service
retaining our
company. We're very
businesses-
mobile.
Yeah. Retaining our businesses is actually as important, if not more important, to us
Sure.
than the attraction of
Okay.
new. Absolutely.
Because that's a high-end technology, engineering-based firm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything further, gentlemen, commissioners? A motion to adjourn for adjournment?
So moved.
Second, Chris? All in favor, aye? We're adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you,
Hey,
Skip.
Skip.